She woke up with the cold biting her skin and the damp concrete pressing against her back. Another night had passed in the alley. Another night of listening to the city hum and watching shadows move across the walls. She had learned to sleep lightly, to wake at the slightest sound of danger, to protect herself in ways most people never thought about. She had a small backpack, worn and frayed, carrying what little she owned. A change of clothes, a tattered notebook, a pen, and a photograph of a piano she had once seen in a music store window. It was her reminder that there was a world beyond this life, a world of sound and beauty. She stretched, rubbing her hands together for warmth, and looked around the alley. Trash cans tipped over, cardboard boxes strewn about, the smell of dampness and leftover food lingering in the air. Despite the hardships, she had a rhythm to her day. She knew where to find food, where the streets were safer, and which areas were best for finding money or a kind hand. But the music, her music, was always in her mind, never leaving her even when the world seemed too harsh to endure. She made her way to the streets, walking carefully so that her worn shoes did not make a sound on the wet pavement. The city was alive, buzzing with people hurrying past, their attention absorbed by their own lives. She watched them, feeling invisible and yet somehow present, a shadow moving alongside the living. Her stomach grumbled, but she ignored it. Some days were harder than others, but she had learned to survive. A small park appeared ahead, and she ducked inside, grateful for a quiet corner. She had brought her notebook, and she opened it to a page filled with notes and sketches of musical scales and compositions. Sometimes, when no one was watching, she would hum to herself, imagining a piano under her fingers, the notes flowing like water, each one telling a story. Her music was her escape, her comfort, her companion. A few children played nearby, their laughter bright and free, a sound that seemed almost alien to her life. She watched them for a moment, remembering a time when she too had known carefree days. But those memories were distant, softened by the reality of the streets. She pulled her coat tighter around her, feeling the chill seep into her bones. Still, she allowed herself a small smile, imagining one day playing music in a place where children could hear and feel the magic she carried in her heart. Food was the next concern. She walked past cafes and restaurants, hoping for a kind gesture, a dropped coin, or a leftover sandwich. Sometimes luck was on her side. Other times she had to go without. Today, a small bakery window caught her eye, the smell of fresh bread filling the air. She lingered nearby, pretending to tie her shoelace, hoping someone might notice her and offer a piece of bread. An older woman behind the counter looked out, frowning slightly, but her gaze softened when she saw the girl's worn clothes and tired eyes. With a kind nod, she slipped a small bag of pastries into her hand without a word. She thanked the woman quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, and quickly moved to a bench to savor the treat. After eating, she walked toward the busier streets, moving with a purpose. She knew that somewhere in the city, there were places where she could sit and practice on old pianos left for public use. One such place was the community center, a building with chipped paint, but a piano that still sang beautifully when touched with care. She approached it cautiously, knowing that she would be watched. Some people gave her suspicious looks, but she had grown used to it. She ignored them and focused on the keys, her fingers brushing the cold surface before finding their rhythm. The piano responded as if it had been waiting for her. Notes tumbled out, first tentative, then stronger, weaving a melody that carried her away from the streets, away from hunger and the cold, away from the noise and the suspicion. Her music told her story, the struggle, the hope, the dream that refused to die. People passing by paused, some smiling, some moving on, but she played as if the world were listening. And in that moment it was. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. She knew she couldn't stay too long. The center would eventually close, and she had no place to return to tonight. Packing her things, she lingered, touching the keys once more, memorizing the feel of them under her fingers. It was a ritual, a way to remind herself that her talent was real, that it could not be stolen by circumstances. As the sun began to set, She walked toward the city's heart, where the grand concert hall stood. She had seen it many times from afar, its lights bright and inviting, the sounds of music spilling from its doors. She had dreamed of playing there, but it seemed impossible. Yet today, drawn by the music echoing in her mind and the faint hope that life might offer a chance, she approached the entrance. People hurried past, unaware of her presence. Yet she felt a strange pull, a connection to the place, as if it were waiting for her too. She paused at the steps, taking a deep breath. Her heart raced, but it was not fear alone. It was anticipation, the thrill of imagining herself inside, at the piano, performing for an audience who might hear and understand her. She had always been invisible, overlooked by the world. But here, perhaps, she could make herself seen and heard. A doorman glanced at her, raising an eyebrow at her worn clothes and tired expression. She hesitated, unsure if she should retreat, but then something inside her whispered to keep going. Summoning courage she didn't know she had, she stepped forward. Each step echoed in the marble hallway, a sound both terrifying and exhilarating. She clutched her notebook close, imagining her music filling the space, imagining herself not as a girl on the streets, but as a musician, a storyteller, a dreamer. In the quiet corners of her mind, she heard the first notes of her melody, imagined the applause, imagined a world where she was more than just a homeless girl. Today, the city had not been kind, but perhaps, just perhaps, the concert hall would be. And as she waited near the grand doors, taking a final deep breath, she felt a spark of hope. This spark, small but persistent, was enough to keep her moving, to keep dreaming, to keep believing that music could change everything. The streetlights began to glow, reflecting off puddles from a recent rain. She looked at the piano keys she had memorized earlier, the melodies etched into her mind, and she knew that no matter what happened next, she would not stop playing. Music was her voice, her shield, her companion. And tonight, maybe, just maybe, it would be her chance to shine. She stood at the entrance of the grand concert hall, her heart pounding like a drum inside her chest. The doors were massive, golden handles gleaming under the warm lights, and inside she could hear the faint echo of music, soft yet inviting. For a moment, she hesitated, feeling the weight of her worn shoes and tattered coat, thinking about how out of place she might seem among the elegantly dressed people streaming past. She drew in a deep breath, trying to steady herself. The music called to her in a way nothing else had, and she could not turn away. A staff member, tall and formal in a dark suit, noticed her lingering by the doors. His eyes narrowed slightly, assessing her presence. She straightened her posture, trying to look calm and confident despite the nerves twisting her stomach. She imagined the piano she had practiced on countless times, the keys under her fingers, the melody flowing like water. She wanted nothing more than to let that music fill this hall, even for just a few moments. The staff member approached, his steps deliberate. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice polite but cautious. She swallowed hard, feeling the lump in her throat. She opened her mouth to speak, then paused, realizing that her voice trembled with more than just cold. Finally, she found her courage. I can play," she said softly. "On the piano. I just need a moment. Please." He looked at her, eyebrows raised. "Play? Here." His voice carried a hint of doubt, but he didn't dismiss her immediately. Something about her determination, the quiet intensity in her eyes, made him pause. He glanced around, noticing the staff moving in the lobby, the audience gathering for the evening concert. "Follow me," he said almost reluctantly. But just for a few minutes. Relief and nervous excitement coursed through her veins as she followed him through the grand hall. The chandeliers sparkled above, their crystals reflecting light across the polished floors. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings, and velvet curtains framed the stage like a royal painting. Her eyes widened, taking in every detail, but she forced herself to focus on the piano at the center. It was magnificent, its polished black surface gleaming, keys pristine and inviting. It was more beautiful than anything she had ever touched, yet it felt familiar, as if it had been waiting for her. The staff member gestured toward the piano. "You have 5 minutes," he said. "Make it quick." She nodded, barely believing her luck, and approached the instrument slowly, her fingers trembling. She took a deep breath, placing her hands on the keys. The cool surface met her touch, and a shiver ran through her. She closed her eyes for a moment, recalling the melodies she had practiced in her notebook, the songs that had carried her through so many lonely nights. Then she began to play. The first notes were tentative, soft, almost hesitant. But as her confidence grew, the music swelled, filling the hall with a sound that seemed impossible to come from someone so small and fragile. The melody was tender, weaving a story of struggle and hope, of nights spent in the cold and dreams that refused to fade. It was music born from pain, but also from resilience and longing. As she played, she noticed the staff member watching closely, his expression changing from skepticism to astonishment. A few early audience members had paused near the lobby, drawn by the unexpected sound. They stopped, their conversations dying away, as the music wrapped around them. The notes carried an honesty and beauty that made people forget where they were and what they were doing. Even the rustle of programs and coughs fell silent, as if the hall itself was listening. She lost herself in the music, her eyes closed, fingers dancing across the keys with a grace she had never dared to show anyone before. She played the pieces she had imagined for years, combining them into a story only she could tell. Each note carried her memories, her fears, her hopes. She could feel the energy of the room responding, the space vibrating with the emotion she poured into the melody. The hall, grand and imposing, felt like a sanctuary for her soul. A few more audience members trickled in, their curiosity piqued by the unusual sound. They paused at the edges of the hall, some standing in awe, some whispering softly to one another. The girl did not notice them, lost in the rhythm and flow of the music. She could feel the presence of the piano beneath her hands, guiding her, supporting her. It was more than an instrument. It was a bridge from her lonely life on the streets to a world she had only dreamed of. Minutes passed like seconds, and when she finally finished, there was a moment of silence so profound it felt almost sacred. Then, slowly, applause began. It started as a gentle clapping, tentative, unsure, and then grew louder, stronger, until it filled the hall with thunderous appreciation. She opened her eyes, startled, and saw people standing, some with tears glistening in their eyes, all focused on her. She had never experienced anything like it. She had never imagined anyone hearing her music in such a way. The staff member, once doubtful, now looked astonished, almost as if he could not believe what he had witnessed. He stepped forward, saying, "That was extraordinary, truly extraordinary." She nodded, unable to speak, her heart racing with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. For the first time in her life, she felt seen and appreciated, not for her appearance or her circumstances, but for her talent and the beauty she could share. A few of the musicians who had been preparing backstage came forward, whispering words of admiration and encouragement. One of them, a pianist she recognized from earlier performances, smiled warmly and said, "You have a gift. Never let it go. Keep playing. Keep sharing it with the world." Her eyes widened, and she nodded, overwhelmed. These were words she had longed to hear, but never dared to hope for. As she stepped away from the piano, the staff member guided her back to the entrance. The applause continued for a few moments longer, and she could feel the warmth of recognition lingering on her skin. Outside, the night was cool and quiet, the city lights casting long reflections on the wet pavement. She clutched her notebook, her hands still trembling, and took a deep breath, savoring the sensation of accomplishment. For the first time, she felt that her life might not be defined solely by hardship. There was possibility now, a chance that her music could lead her somewhere new, somewhere better. She thought of the notes she had played, the melodies that had flowed from her soul, and realized that she had shared a piece of herself, raw and unguarded, with people who would never forget it. That alone was enough to make the cold streets feel a little less lonely, a little less harsh. As she walked away from the hall, She replayed the experience in her mind. Every look of awe, every whispered compliment, every beat of applause became a treasure she could carry with her. She knew the road ahead would still be difficult, that the streets were still waiting, and that her life was far from easy. But for the first time, hope had taken root. She had been given a glimpse of something more, a world where her talent could shine, and she would chase it, no matter the obstacles. The city around her seemed different now, brighter in a way she had never noticed before. The streets, the lights, even the strangers passing by carried a sense of possibility. She held her head a little higher, her steps a little lighter. The music she had played was not just a gift to the audience. It was a gift to herself, a reminder that she was more than her circumstances, more than the cold nights and empty stomachs. She was a musician, a dreamer, and for tonight, at least, she had touched the hearts of others with her art. She stepped back into the hall the next day, her hands slightly trembling, but her heart full of determination. The memory of the previous evening's performance still lingered, vivid and powerful. She had felt the magic of the hall, the way her music could command attention and stir emotions, and now she had the chance to do it again, properly, in front of a full audience. Today, she was no longer just a girl from the streets. She was a musician ready to share her story through her piano. The hall was quiet as she approached the grand piano, polished and gleaming in the soft lights. The staff had cleared a small area for her, and the musicians who had encouraged her before were there, nodding and smiling. She felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. This was more than just a few minutes of music. It was a chance to show what she could truly do, to tell her story in every note. She took a deep breath, placed her fingers on the keys, and closed her eyes. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, as if she was greeting an old friend. But as the melody grew, so did her confidence. She played with all the emotion she had kept hidden for so long. The cold nights, the empty stomachs, the fear and loneliness, and the small moments of beauty she had found in the streets. Each note carried her story, and the hall seemed to lean in, listening intently. The audience was silent, captivated by the honesty in her music. Her fingers moved gracefully over the keys, and the melody swelled, filling every corner of the hall. It was not just music. It was a journey. She could feel herself transported to a place where hardship did not exist, where dreams could grow and take flight. The audience felt it too, a shared understanding of struggle and hope. Some eyes glistened with tears, others were wide with awe. She had never seen anything like it, people listening so closely, letting her music touch them. The piece she played was one she had created in her mind over countless nights, imagining what it would be like to perform in a grand hall. She had no sheet music, only her memory and the passion that drove her. Every chord, every note was deliberate yet flowed naturally. Her music rose and fell like waves, gentle in some moments, powerful and commanding in others. It spoke of sadness, resilience, and the beauty she had found in the smallest things. A warm meal, a kind word, a melody in the wind. As she played, she noticed subtle movements in the audience. People leaned forward, completely absorbed. Some had hands clasped tightly, as if holding onto the emotion she was pouring into the room. Others sat back, eyes closed, letting the music wash over them. Even the musicians nearby seemed caught in the spell, unable to look away, their instruments momentarily forgotten. The girl felt a sense of connection that she had never experienced before. She was no longer alone. Her music had created a bridge between her world and theirs. Minutes passed, though it felt like hours. The girl played without pause, lost in the rhythm, the melody, the story she was telling. She could feel the energy of the hall responding to her, a silent conversation between the piano and the audience. The notes carried her pain and joy, her fears and hopes, and in return, the hall offered silence, attention, and admiration. For the first time in her life, she felt truly understood, not through words, but through the music that flowed from her hands. Her performance reached a crescendo, a powerful moment that seemed to lift the audience with it. The music filled every space, vibrating through the floors and walls, wrapping around everyone present. She could see people leaning in, their eyes reflecting the intensity of the experience. Some were wiping tears, others were holding their breath, fully absorbed in the story she was telling without uttering a single word. It was as if the hall itself was alive, breathing with the rhythm of her music. Then, gradually, the melody softened, transitioning into a gentle, tender conclusion. She allowed the final notes to linger in the air, letting them settle over the audience like a gentle caress. When she finally lifted her hands from the keys, there was a pause, a moment of profound silence that seemed to hold its breath along with her. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started as a ripple, quiet but persistent, and grew into a wave of clapping, cheers, and whistles. The girl opened her eyes, overwhelmed by the sight of the audience on their feet, celebrating the music she had shared. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she bowed, feeling a mix of disbelief, gratitude, and joy. She had never imagined that her music could have this effect, that it could touch so many lives in such a profound way. The staff and musicians around her offered smiles and words of praise, but it was the audience's reaction that mattered most. They had seen her, really seen her, not as a homeless girl, but as an artist, a storyteller, a human being with a voice that could resonate far beyond the streets she came from. After the applause died down, a few people approached her, offering words of encouragement and admiration. Some were musicians themselves, some were patrons who had come to the concert, but all shared the same awe and respect for her talent. One older pianist knelt slightly to meet her eyes and said softly, "You have a gift that cannot be taught. Keep playing no matter what. The world needs to hear you." She nodded, her heart full, grateful beyond words for the recognition. For the first time, she felt that her struggles had meaning, that her music could transcend her circumstances. Leaving the stage, she felt a lightness she had never known. The streets outside, the cold nights, the hunger. All of it seemed less heavy now, not because it had changed, but because she had discovered a part of herself that could rise above it. Her music had given her a sense of purpose, a direction she had never dared to imagine. She had shared her soul with a room full of strangers, and they had responded with appreciation and wonder. It was a moment she would carry forever. That evening, as she walked through the quiet streets back to her temporary shelter, she reflected on what had happened. The memory of the applause, the faces of the audience, the feeling of the piano under her fingers. It all felt almost surreal. Yet she knew it was real. She had proven to herself, more than anyone else, that her talent and her voice mattered. The world could be harsh, unforgiving, and cold, but it also held moments of beauty, of connection, and she had experienced one of those moments fully. She thought about the people who had listened, who had responded to her music with open hearts. Their reactions had shown her that her story, her experiences, and her talent were valuable. They had recognized her for who she was, not for her appearance, her clothes, or her life circumstances, but for the emotion and truth she brought to the piano. It was a revelation that stayed with her, a spark of hope that could not be extinguished. That night, as she lay on her thin mattress in the shelter, she hummed the melodies she had played, letting the music carry her into sleep. Her dreams were filled with grand concert halls, audiences waiting in silence, and the sound of her piano filling the air. She imagined herself traveling to different cities, sharing her gift, inspiring others who had known hardship, and proving that art and determination could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. The next morning, she awoke with a sense of purpose she had never felt before. She knew that she could not let this opportunity slip away, that she needed to continue practicing, refining her skills, and sharing her music with the world. The concert hall had given her a glimpse of what was possible, and now it was up to her to pursue it with everything she had. The streets, the hunger, the cold, they were still part of her reality, but they no longer defined her. She had found a way to rise above them, even if only for a few hours at a time. With renewed determination, she set out to find places where she could practice, people who could teach her, and opportunities to perform again. She carried the memory of the concert hall with her like a guiding light, a reminder that her music had the power to connect, inspire, and transform. She no longer felt invisible. She had a voice, and it mattered. And as she walked through the bustling city streets, the wind carrying the faint echo of distant music, she knew that this was only the beginning of her journey. The applause echoed through the hall, rolling like waves, carrying with it a sense of awe and admiration that the girl had never experienced before. She stood frozen for a moment, overwhelmed by the reaction, her hands still hovering above the piano keys. The audience's faces were alive with amazement, some leaning forward in their seats, others with tears glistening in their eyes. She realized then that her music had not just filled the room. It had touched the hearts of every person present. People began to approach her, a few at a time, their words sincere and full of emotion. An older man who had been sitting in the front row extended his hand, shaking hers gently. "Your music is extraordinary," he said. "It speaks to something deep inside. You must continue to play. The world needs to hear you." She nodded, her throat tight, unable to find the words to express the gratitude swelling inside her. Each compliment felt like a lifeline, a recognition that she had never received before. A few of the musicians who had been preparing for the evening performance came forward, curious and impressed. One of them, a pianist with kind eyes, crouched slightly to meet her gaze. "You have something rare," he said softly. "Not just skill, but a voice that can move people. I want to help you. You deserve the chance to learn and grow. Will you let me?" Her eyes widened, and she nodded quickly, overwhelmed by the generosity of someone willing to see her potential beyond her circumstances. The staff member who had allowed her to play earlier approached once more, his expression now a mixture of respect and wonder. "I wasn't sure what to expect," he admitted, "but that was beyond anything I could have imagined. You've shown courage, talent, and heart. There is a place for you here, if you want it." She felt warmth flood her chest, a mixture of hope and disbelief. The doors that had once seemed so imposing now appeared as gateways to a life she had never dared to dream of. Word of her performance quickly spread through the hall, reaching others who had come for the evening concert. People who had been in the lobby, staff members, and even patrons in other rooms spoke of the homeless girl whose piano silenced them all. There was a quiet buzz of excitement and curiosity, and soon, more people were seeking her out, eager to see the musician who had captured their hearts. She moved among them, listening to their reactions, each one filling her with a growing sense of purpose and belonging. The audience's reaction was not just admiration. It was recognition of the struggles she had endured and the resilience she had shown. Many saw the contrast between her worn clothes and the elegance of her music, and it made her story all the more powerful. People were not just listening, they were understanding. They could feel the hardships she had faced, the loneliness, the fear, and yet they could also feel the hope and determination that had carried her to the piano. A few individuals approached her with offers she could hardly believe. One was a music teacher who ran a community program for talented students with difficult backgrounds. He explained that he had seen her playing and wanted to offer her formal lessons, a chance to develop her talent in a structured environment. She listened, barely able to speak, nodding in disbelief. Another person offered to sponsor her for a small recital, promising an audience that would truly appreciate her music. Each offer felt like a bridge to a life she had only imagined in her dreams. Despite all the attention, she remained humble, her focus still on the music rather than the accolades. She understood that this recognition was not just about her talent, but about the journey she had endured to get here. Every note she had played carried the story of nights spent in cold alleys, of searching for food, of clinging to the hope that one day, someone would hear her music. And now, that hope was becoming reality. The girl realized that this was more than a single performance. It was a turning point. The audience's reaction, the applause, the offers of guidance and opportunity. They were proof that her life could change. She had never experienced acceptance like this, a genuine acknowledgement of who she was and what she could do. It was a moment of validation, a reminder that her struggles had meaning, that her voice mattered, and that she could rise above the circumstances that had once defined her. As the evening wore on, She took a moment to look around the hall, observing the people who had been touched by her music. Their expressions, filled with emotion and wonder, were a reflection of what she had always hoped to achieve. Music was her language, and for the first time she felt understood. She had a sense of connection that transcended words, a bond created through the shared experience of sound and feeling. It was profound, and it gave her the courage to continue on this path. The staff member who had guided her through the hall spoke again, suggesting that she might perform at an upcoming event that featured young talents from challenging backgrounds. She felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but mostly hope. The idea of performing again, with an audience ready to listen and appreciate her, was exhilarating. It was a chance to continue sharing her story, to let her music reach even more people, and to show that perseverance and talent could overcome even the most difficult circumstances. She spent the rest of the evening talking quietly with those who had approached her, listening to their advice and accepting their support. Each conversation was a reminder that her life was beginning to change, that doors she had never dared to open were now swinging wide. She realized that while the streets would still be part of her past, they no longer defined her future. Her music had created an opportunity, and it was up to her to embrace it fully. As the night came to a close, she walked out of the hall, the applause and admiration still echoing in her mind. The city streets were quiet, the night air crisp and fresh. She felt a sense of peace and purpose she had never known before. The piano, the concert hall, the audience. They had given her more than recognition. They had given her a sense of belonging, a reminder that her life could be more than survival. She thought about the people she had met, the encouragement she had received, and the offers of guidance and opportunity. Each one was a step toward a new chapter in her life, a chapter where she could pursue her passion without fear or limitation. She knew it would not be easy. The streets, her past, and the challenges ahead were still real. But now, she had something stronger than fear. Hope, talent, and the knowledge that her music could make a difference. As she returned to the shelter that night, she hummed the melodies that had captivated the audience, feeling them resonate within her. She imagined future performances, new compositions, and the possibility of reaching people beyond the city streets. The applause and recognition had shown her that her voice mattered, that her struggles had shaped her into someone capable of creating beauty and inspiring others. Lying down on her thin mattress, she reflected on the events of the evening. Her heart was full of gratitude and determination. She knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, but for the first time, she felt equipped to face it. She had discovered her strength, her talent, and her ability to connect with others through music. It was a gift she intended to nurture and share, no matter what obstacles arose. That night, sleep came easily, carrying her into dreams of concert halls, appreciative audiences, and endless melodies. She had learned that one performance could change everything, that her life was not limited by circumstance, and that hope and perseverance could lead to extraordinary opportunities. And as she drifted into sleep, she held on to the thought that tomorrow would bring another chance to play, to inspire, and to continue her journey toward a future filled with music, recognition, and hope. The days following her performance were filled with a mixture of excitement and anticipation. She had received offers to learn from skilled musicians, invitations to play at small events, and guidance from teachers who wanted to help her develop her talent. For the first time, she felt that her future could be shaped by something other than survival. Music had opened doors she had never imagined, and she was determined to walk through them. Her routine began to change. Instead of wandering the streets in search of food and shelter, she spent hours at a small community music center where she was given a piano and lessons. She absorbed every word her teachers said, practicing diligently, learning techniques that made her music even richer and more expressive. The skills she developed on her own were now complemented by guidance, allowing her to explore new compositions and refine the melodies she had carried in her heart for so long. She also began performing for small audiences. Each recital was different. Sometimes it was a handful of community members. Other times it was a group of young musicians, each with their own stories. She noticed how her music could evoke emotions in people, how they leaned forward, listened intently, and sometimes shed tears. With each performance, she grew more confident, more at ease, and more certain that this path was where she was meant to be. The concert hall that had first given her the chance to play remained a symbol of her transformation. She visited often, practicing and performing, and slowly, she was no longer seen as the homeless girl who had wandered in, but as a talented musician in her own right. The staff, the musicians, and even regular patrons recognized her presence, nodding with familiarity and respect. She had earned her place, not because of sympathy, but because of her skill, dedication, and the heart she poured into her music. Her life began to stabilize. The music center offered her a small stipend, and a kind teacher helped her secure a safe place to stay. She could finally rest without fear of the cold streets or the uncertainty of where her next meal would come from. Though the shadows of her past remained, they no longer dictated her daily existence. She had a purpose, a routine, and a direction. The piano, once a dream, had become the foundation of her life. Each day, she practiced with a mixture of discipline and passion. She experimented with different styles, exploring classical pieces, improvisation, and her own compositions. Her music began to carry a signature voice, a reflection of her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. Teachers praised her dedication, and fellow students often remarked on the emotion she conveyed through every note. Her talent was undeniable, and the more she played, the more her confidence grew. Opportunities started coming her way. Invitations to perform at local events turned into offers for larger concerts, and eventually, she was given a chance to play in the grand hall where her journey had begun. Walking onto the stage once more, she felt a mixture of nostalgia and pride. The lights, the polished floors, and the audience waiting in anticipation were no longer intimidating. They were familiar, a part of the path she had traveled from the streets to this moment. Her performance that night was breathtaking. She played with a depth and emotion that resonated with every listener. The audience, now fully aware of her journey, listened not just to the music but to the story woven into each note. She was no longer the girl who had wandered into the hall. She was a musician, a storyteller, and an inspiration. The applause that followed was thunderous, heartfelt, and unending. She bowed, tears of joy streaming down her face, feeling a profound connection with everyone who had witnessed her growth. Beyond performances, she also began to mentor younger students, many of whom faced challenges similar to those she had experienced. She shared her story with them, encouraging them to persevere, to find their own voice, and to believe in the power of their dreams. Her guidance was filled with empathy and understanding, and she quickly became a source of inspiration and support. She realized that her journey was not only about her own success, but also about helping others discover their potential. Despite her rising recognition, she remained humble. She never forgot the streets, the nights of hunger, or the moments when hope had seemed impossible. Those experiences were woven into her music, giving it authenticity and depth. They reminded her of where she had come from and why she had chosen to persevere. She carried gratitude in her heart for every opportunity, every teacher, and every audience member who had believed in her. As months passed, she began to travel for performances, exploring new cities and sharing her music with wider audiences. She encountered people from all walks of life, and her story inspired many. People were drawn not only to her talent but to the courage and resilience she embodied. She was living proof that circumstances did not define a person's potential, and that dedication, passion, and heart could overcome even the most difficult beginnings. Through it all, she continued to compose her own music, pieces that reflected her journey, her dreams, and the people she had met along the way. Each composition was a story, a snapshot of her life, and a gift to those who listened. Her music became her voice, speaking in ways words could not, touching hearts and leaving lasting impressions. Eventually, she was offered scholarships and opportunities to study music formally. She embraced these chances with dedication, knowing that every lesson, every practice, and every performance was a step toward a future she had once only imagined. Her life had transformed from uncertainty and survival to one of purpose, recognition, and fulfillment. She had built a bridge from the streets to the stage, from hardship to hope, and from loneliness to connection. She often reflected on the moment she had walked into the concert hall for the first time, hesitant and uncertain. That step, small as it seemed, had been the beginning of everything. It had led to recognition, opportunities, growth, and transformation. She understood that courage, even in the smallest acts, could change a life forever. Her journey was a testament to the power of perseverance, talent, and the belief that dreams, no matter how distant, could be reached. In the years that followed, she continued to perform, teach, and inspire. Her music touched countless lives, and her story encouraged many to pursue their passions despite challenges. She remained grounded, always remembering the path she had traveled and the people who had helped her along the way. The streets, once her entire world, had become a memory, a reminder of the resilience that had carried her to new heights. Through music, she had found not only recognition but also purpose, hope, and belonging. She had transformed her life, moving from a place of struggle to one of opportunity and inspiration. And every time she sat at a piano, feeling the keys beneath her fingers, she knew that she had found her voice, her place, and her reason to keep moving forward, touching hearts and sharing the beauty of music with the world.